Hello, Permission to Leap. Welcome back to yet another episode of the podcast exploring the stories of people who have brought their visions to life. Every week, I speak with an inspiring guest to navigate the process they took to take the leap in their own lives from the day they first committed to the day they landed on the other side. Permission to Leap is that spark that will push you to believe in your dreams again and make them your reality. Today's guest is a personal friend, Patricia Lohan. Patricia is a coach, a healer, a Feng Shui expert, and a passionate female entrepreneur. She brilliantly combines the power of the mind, surroundings, and inner healing, clearing and aligning for a holistic approach to life and business success. Her skills range from Reiki to Feng Shui, and she's a pro at positivity and total life transformation. Patricia knows that your inner world completely affects your outer world and vice versa. So when you work on both simultaneously, you are set up to achieve great things. Patricia is an incredibly spiritual person, but also completely practical. She loves nothing more than business and has 15 years of experience running and growing 3 successful startups of her own. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. When I hear all that stuff, I'm just like, oh my God. That's a lot of stuff.
So accomplished. In this journey of developing 3 startups over 15 years, you have taken a whole lot of leaps.
Yeah.
All around the world as well.
All around the world, that's for sure. And it's so interesting. We were like, well, which leap? And, you know, people often say to me, wow, you're so brave. And as you pick up your big mug with the B on it, you're so brave. I feel like that bravery comes through building a muscle of just repeating leaps, basically, because you kind of, you just become more hardwired for it and more capable of it and as you have created that structure and you've really identified those levels and the leaps. For sure, I resonated with that when I learned more about that process that you identified. I'm like, yeah, totally. But when you're more familiar with it, it gets easier.
Totally. I wonder if that's something that we should chat about a little bit, because looking at, maybe one of your first leaps where you were looking at leaving your parents' restaurant business to go to India versus your most recent leap where you left Ireland and decided to just relocate to Bali. What do you feel like has been the change, or how do you feel like you're maybe more able to move through that process now versus back with your other leaps?
I feel like the first one was actually a leap out of desperation. It was a leap out of I have to change something. Everything really felt like I used to dress, Brie, me, I'm like Mrs. Rainbow. I'm always in bright, colorful clothes. I used to go to work every day in this business that I'd set up with my dad and run for 7 years. And by the 6th and 7th year, I was wearing black every day. It was like I was going to my own funeral every day. I'd lost the passion. I'd lost the spark. I'd lost everything. And I was kind of running on empty. And that was really a space of I don't know what else I can do. I just have to get out of here. It was a real desperation place. And when the student's ready, the teacher appears, and a friend of mine said to me, oh, I think you really like this book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And of course I read and I was like, that's amazing, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of did the leap to move to India to become a yoga teacher. Because I was like, wow, well, I had no plan though, and no vision of what I wanted to create, which is very different in that leaping process, because I was really leaping into the complete unknown. Whereas the leap from, we had our house in Ireland, we just got married, seriously, the typical next thing is go settle, have babies, and stick with the current, a very successful business you are running. Not, let's just quit that business. Ken quits his job of 30 years and let's put the house up to rent and head to Bali. But that was also one of these spaces of we felt like we needed to leave to expand and grow. And the very first book, The 4-Hour Workweek, was this book around freedom. And even though I had moved back to Ireland to set up this super successful business, I felt like I was almost in the same situation again. I created the same pattern because living in Ireland when I was in the restaurant, I looked around this square box in the restaurant one day and I said to my dad, like, is this it? And he was just like, isn't it great? And I'm like, oh, I need to leave. Like, this isn't what I got. I'm stuck in this box. There's more. My soul was like so wailing. But interestingly enough, when I went back to Ireland after living in India and training and having basically that whole big spiritual awakening and starting my business, my holistic business and Peripo practice, I was still in another box. I had like created this business that had me stuck in a place, you know, where my clients came to visit me. It was very in person. It wasn't online. And I kind of stepped back and went, hang on a minute. What have I just done? I just created this business that isn't what I really want. I still want to travel more. We want to do more, go on more adventures. So I feel like that was a beautiful place from an aware. It was a much more aware perspective of going, I know what I want to create now, as opposed to the first leap really was kind of into the own. I don't have a clue. I'm just surrendering everything. I'm letting go of everything, and who knows what'll happen. Yeah. Whereas this time, this business was set up really intentionally to be able to work from anywhere. And you know, when you kind of set out on a plan, like we just thought we wanted to travel loads and be like digital nomads and see loads of the world. We got to Bali and we were like, well, because we originally went to India and India was great, but it was just not the right place for us. It was kind of trying to spit us out, even though I lived there for so long. I loved it. It was not the right place for us at that time. It just felt really hard. We got to Bali, we're like, this is really nice. Actually, do we really want to be nomads? Or do we just want a really nice lifestyle like this, that we can travel and do cool stuff? And we're like, oh, this is what we want. So it was kind of like your decision, like what you think you really want may not be actually it, but until you go and feel it and experience it. So that's what happened. And this was a very kind of more mindful way of creating it, as opposed to, oh, I'm just going to jump and see what happens.
Yeah, totally. So funny story. I was just at a party last week and we were talking about how being a digital nomad is just like the entrepreneurial version of being homeless. And like we were all laughing about it.
I know, that is totally it. And you know what, the whole part of it is like, we're Feng Shui consultants, so we work with energy of environment. So it was so ungrounding for us. It was really tough, and being in environments that were just not feeding you, stopping, coming up and down. It's like, so it was just not good for our constitution and our energy. So once we got here, we were like, yes, this is it. And it's about creating that lifestyle so much more intentionally than I had ever done before. And that was what this leap was about. And it was also for Ken, for his career as well, like wanted to step out of what he'd been doing. But when you're in a restricted kind of like, you know, everyone around you knows you've been doing the same thing for 30 years, it's going to be harder to kind of get out of that. So we're here in Bali doing our thing. Nobody really knows what we're doing. Well, unless they're following us on social media, and then it's like, yay, look at our life.
Right. I love that distinction though, because I feel like that's kind of a normal progression, right? Like when I started leaping, people said similar things to me, like, oh, you're so brave. You moved to Italy on your own without knowing anyone or the language or blah, blah, blah. And Italy to me was a similar thing where I was like, I just have to get out of where I'm at. Like I can't stay here and I need to go somewhere and I don't care where that is. So I'm just going to take the first thing available and like, get out. And it's interesting that progression that happens, that you go from kind of just leaping towards something that isn't what you currently have versus purposefully creating what it is that you desire.
Yeah, for sure. And the interesting part is like when the next kind of leap in between those was really, I moved back after being in India, training in yoga, doing sound healing, all these other modalities. I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm moving to Dublin. And I'd never really lived there. I'd lived there for a couple of months, like years earlier, and on an internship. That was a leap of like total faith. I'd €50. I was setting up this kind of yoga sound healing business. Didn't really know where I was going to be, what I was going to do. And I just kind of, again, trusted it. And it was not with that intentional energy. So, hey, presto, I've ended up in a business that I ended up creating a business that I was kind of stuck in that one place and not being able to do it. And kind of it happened to me as opposed to me creating it. Yeah. So this is really a bigger part for me around what is it you really want? Like, what's that bigger vision? And when we really dug into that, I wanted to live in a tropical place where it's warm and where I can do yoga in the mornings and it's really close and it's small and intimate and we can really have a beautiful life and travel more. And that's exactly what we created this time. thankfully.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too stems from, because usually when we're like new at creating, we create based on what we don't want, right? Like, well, I know I don't want to be here. I know I don't want to be wearing black every day. I know I don't want to be experiencing this. I don't want this.
Yeah.
And we end up then kind of limiting our creative abilities, because instead of looking at what's possible, we're just creating based on, this version of what we don't want. Right.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I love that we're talking about this transition, because I haven't really had this chat with anyone before. So when you, like, what has been the result? What do you feel like has been the difference between who you are in creating from what you don't want versus creating what you want?
It feels very surreal, to be honest, because it's like, oh, I remember journaling about what my dream day would look like. And oh, that's actually it now. Like that is the kind of surreal part. Whereas in the past, it was not from that space of intentionality. So it was just like things would come flying at you from different places, and you're like, well, and you didn't really know where you were going or what your bigger vision was. And now it's like, oh, this is like, and then it's like, if it's not totally in alignment, then I work out and go, okay, how do I need to change this? And you start really maneuvering it and changing it to suit you more so than it being, I think it's like in the intentionality versus the firefighting. Because when you're in the firefighting mode, it's just like, trying to keep your head above water. And that's really when I say I moved to Dublin, and it was that, oh my God, I'm just like surviving. I'm definitely happier. Like I definitely want to be going to this yoga and teaching these classes for €5 a day, making it for a class. But I was like really earning so little. And I was really in trust mode, which was very, very, I don't know, it's like you're on a tightrope of like, I'm really trusting, but oh fuck, I'm scared. Whereas this time it was like, oh, actually I'm trusting and I know I can really do it. So there was like a confidence. I think that also comes through that whole progression of the more leaps you take, and not necessarily they need to be huge leaps, but like the more steps you take that are kind of out of your comfort zone, the more you trust into it for the next growth or the next iteration of your business. Because coming to Bali, we really had I'd obviously been working as a Feng Shui consultant for many, many years, but it wasn't my core business. So coming here, I was like, well, I want to be online. Like I wanted to be online, so we're going to create that online. But I had set up other businesses before. So I kind of went, well, I started that other one, €50, and that did pretty well. So yeah, I started that one. So I had that confidence in being like, okay, well, I can do this one. If I've done that one, I can do this one. So, and that's that whole thing of just being persistent and showing up and getting clearer with, well, here I am, I have my online business. I can work from anywhere now, and it makes it bigger. It feels like I'm making a bigger impact as well on the world, because it's a bigger reach, it's a bigger audience. And you have more purpose. Like I feel like I have more purpose with this vision. Whereas in the past, it was more like survival. That past leap was a survival one. Like, okay, I'm just going to do this for me. Whereas this became a bigger leap for the greater good.
Right. Awesome. Now, looking at yourself from, wearing all black, working in your father's restaurant kind of thing, to where you are now, what do you think has been the biggest shift with who you are?
Who am I? The biggest shift is back then I was doing things to please everybody else. I was like I got into that business because I wanted to please my dad. Like I wanted to, help him and support him. I was in all these different community groups. I was helping everybody because it was a people pleaser mode. It was really in people pleasing. Now I totally still work with amazing clients, and I people please, but not in the same way. It's from a place of like, this is how I want to help people, and this is how I can show up and help people. So it's like the choices I've made are so different, and everything is much more intentional around that. So I feel like I'm totally just honoring who I am and how I can show up and be really just me. And that's the difference, is like I wasn't really me. I was just being who I think everyone else wanted me to be. Whereas now I'm just being who I want to be. That's it. And being really, and owning the quirkiness, owning the kind of like, here I'm doing my Christmas giveaway and I've got tinsel wrapped all around me. And that's fun. And that's me. Whereas in the past, I would be like, oh, I can't do that because that wouldn't look right and somebody might disapprove of me. And that's a very different energy. And I think that through doing those leaps, you just build up that more confidence in yourself and what you want. And that's that bigger, it's then that really, what do you want? And that was one of the questions actually when I was working in that business. It was like a huge responsibility. I was 24, like 30 staff when we first started. Like it was absolutely crazy. And like I'd never done anything like that. So it was like the steepest learning curve ever. Basically my dad was like, here, you do it. Which was amazing. But at the same time, I remember sitting, all of my spiritual angels and guides and people came into my life while I was working in that restaurant. Like it was really nuts because the universe was delivering these people that I really needed to support me, including a life coach. I didn't even know what a life coach was. I remember sitting in front of her, like one of my customers in the restaurant, sitting in front of her in her office, bawling my eyes out and her asking this question, what do you want? What do you want? And I just could not answer that question.
Isn't that funny?
I could not answer that question. I did not know because I knew what everyone else wanted from me. But I was not answering the question for what do I really want. And then fast forward to now, people ask me what I'm like, well, here's my vision board. This is what I'm doing. Actually, I'm very happy with my life right now. I'm going to grow this and what's going on with you. Like it's such a big difference.
I had a client last year who I think she's around 45 something. And she had never sat down and ever answered the question, like, what do I need? And I asked her that during a session one day and she was just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing what happens in our lives once we start to answer those things. Once we start to look at, what do I want? What do I need? Who am I in the world? There are questions I feel like we take for granted so much.
Yeah.
And that we just never answer them. We don't look at them.
No. And I feel like we're just swept up in the flow of like, this is what you're meant to do next and this is how you are, whatever cycle in your education, wherever stream of friends you have, like you end up on this flow with all of that. And that's where right now, and in say since that first leap, what's happened is I'm totally against the flow all the time of what everyone is normally doing. So this is what all of the other people that I grew up with and all that, they're all doing this. And I'm the opposite. So like, for example, when I moved to Dublin and set up that business, I used to go on my bicycle to yoga at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So my yoga practice would be finished at 7:30, 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I'd be cycling home after being up for yoga, and the throngs of people coming against me. And like, that is something that used to make me so happy. And I wasn't like out of like, look at you, I was doing this. It was more like, I am following what I want to do. Like, this is my choice. Like, I'm just doing this, and it's so great because I'm owning that and not allowing myself be in this other lane where everyone's going, this is where we all are going this way. There's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like that's another big part around people seeing me going, oh, you're living your life in Bali. How lucky are you? Yeah, it's amazing to live here in Bali and it's beautiful and you've been here, Brie, and it's such a gorgeous place. But you know what? Some people just do want to have a life like living in a house with their with their children settled and live in Ireland or LA or whatever. And that's totally and I'm completely like, go own that if that's what you really want. Amazing. But if there's something inside of you niggling, going, oh, I'm not sure about this, like, you have to go and listen to that, because that's the part inside, like screaming, going, ah, and it really needs to be heard. And it may not necessarily be like, I need to go and change my whole life. It could be just something small. Like, as you said, leaps come in big and small sizes. It could be just something small going, hey, I'm going to go to this art class. Like, I'm going to go to do something that's expressing myself. Like, a leap doesn't necessarily need to be this, my whole life is transforming. It can be. And I think they're the ones that you can talk about really dramatically and you can see huge change. But just the subtle thing of doing something for yourself, like doing something for yourself, honoring that inner part, will also create just a great ripple effect in your own life anyways.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like, especially as women, we have so many expectations placed upon us from like the second that we're born. I think I was in the hospital at one point, like visiting someone who just had a kid, and it was a girl, and they were already talking about this little baby that like wasn't even 5 days old being a mom. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know, as women especially, we come into the world and we're expected to be moms. We're expected to be homemakers. Yeah. We're expected to Like, we have all these expectations placed on us. And I know so many women that just take that. Like you said, you know, you did the business for your dad. They just take it and they don't ever question anything. And then at some point they realize that maybe they're not quite so satisfied or happy, but they still keep going down that path because they're like, well, too late. I've already made this decision, so I'm just going to keep going down it. So I love that you were, you know, conscious enough to sit down. And I know part of it too, just because we had walks and talks and all sorts of stuff, you know, some of it too was kind of precipitated by some people outside of you as well. Right? You had a few nudges and pushes, right?
Oh my God. Like, and actually, just as you say that, I've like shivers in my whole body, because the universe, people just kept coming in. You know, I was like in the restaurant, this guy walks in and he's a yoga teacher, and he's like, I was like, oh, when's your yoga class starting? He's like, tonight at 7:30. I was like, okay, I'll be there. And he was like, she's never going to show up. And I literally started at this class, and like that class was so monumental for me. He said at the start of the class, he's like, this is an hour for you. And that's it. This is the people pleaser, Patricia, who'd been working 17-hour days, to being told this is an hour for you. The tears rolled down my eyes. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing something for myself, that doesn't involve pleasing anybody else. And that was a huge game changer. And then this other lady was the life coach that arrived in. And then I had a woman who was like a meditation teacher came in. And it was like all these different people were like coming into my life through the restaurant. So like in its own way, it was supporting me in this journey, even though it felt like it was my worst enemy at times.
Yeah, I love that. So what do you feel like has been the biggest support for you in this evolution that you've been journeying down?
I feel like, to be honest, like my parents have always been amazing support for doing stuff. Like, so I remember thinking like, I want to go to India, and like my mom and dad will be actually against this, but like they've been used to me jetting off. So like at 18 I went to the Philippines. I lived there for 8 months all on my own. Like 21 I moved to Tokyo and lived there for 10 months all on my own. Like, so they're used to me going on a plane and leaving, and that was one of the things. We were kind of like allowed to do what we wanted in another way, even though I think it was almost societal that stopped me. It was like society that stopped me from, kind of got me caught in the restaurant and set in because this is what everyone else is doing. But actually my parents were not like that at all. They were the top. They're like, go do whatever you want. Like, if you don't want to be here. So when the whole thing came up, I was running the restaurant. My parents were visiting my sister in Australia. I was in charge of all responsibility of all businesses. And someone said to my mom when she came home, she's like, was it really sad saying goodbye to your sister? Like, was it really sad? And mom was like, no, oh my God, she is so happy. Like, how could I be sad leaving her? Like, all I want is my children to be happy. And she literally came in and saw me, and she's like, okay, the one who's right in front of me here is absolutely miserable. And she literally turned around and said, I think you need to leave. And I'm like, actually, let's go. I'm going to India. Like, it just came straight out. Like, I had not even planned that. So in their own way, they were so supportive as well, in a way that they'd be like, everyone was, but other people were not at all, which is kind of weird. Like, the people you'd expect to be like so supportive, they're like, you're crazy leaving a brilliant business. You're crazy doing this. And I just like was like, well, actually I have my parents' support, which they were great. They really have always been like that. Like, you go after whatever you want. Like, you can achieve whatever you want. But actually I would be the person that would put more of the blocks on me than they would, which is kind of mad. But yeah, support wise, they were amazing. Like, in that kind of like, yeah, go do it. Yeah. And of course you're able to do it. Like, you know, that belief, like that you're like, really, do you think? Yeah. And that was the same thing with the restaurants. Like, sure, they should have technically hired someone that knew how to run a restaurant, but they were like, yeah, you'll be able to do it. Here you go do it.
Yeah. It's interesting that, and I don't know if this was your experience at all, but that a lot of the people that when we tell them we're going to do these leaps, it's just their own fears, because they would be unable to take that leap, and they're just projecting those fears onto you. So the other people that were being like, what are you doing moving to India?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, you know, my parents were great. They have leaped a lot as well. You know, we had a business in Ireland. They leased it out, moved to the UK with 3 young daughters. Like, we were like, I don't know, 4, 5, and 6. Moved to the UK for 2 years, set up a business from scratch. Like, they'd set up a lot of businesses from scratch. They were kind of like that. You know, so they had taken like a lot of leaps and risks in their lives. So I think that was something that also, you know, they're like, yeah, go for it. Like, sure, if it doesn't work, try something else, you know, that way, which is, obviously an amazing kind of like role models to have as well. So they were like really going, yeah, well, go for it. You know, if you think it'll work, I'll with you.
Yeah, I love that. So let's see. What do you feel like has been the most difficult part of your leap to Bali?
The most difficult part of the leap to Bali. So it was very different I've usually done all my leaps on my own. So this was a very different one to do with Ken, my husband. And we had like literally just like, we were just married like a few months. And it was a very different like energy, the leap because I'm like, come on, let's go. And Ken was totally up for living in a new country and everything. But for him, the transition was much more difficult. Like he'd been in a job for nearly 30 years. He'd been, we just got married and he'd never lived in a different country. So for him, that was a much more difficult process. So that was kind of like more challenging for me as well, because I'd just be like, here I am, get on with it, blah, blah, blah. But there was that kind of energy, which was a bit more tricky with this one. But obviously, like, it's really great that I was doing it with someone, which was really nice, because a lot of the time when you're doing something all on your own, it can feel a little bit like, oh, this is a bit scary. But like we just said, like the right people always show up. So this time it was really nice to have the support of Ken, but other times I've had support of other people that I just like literally rocked up and be there. It's like, oh my God, this is exactly what I needed. Somebody that's perfect person to tell me the perfect story to support me with this.
I love that.
So that was kind of the trickiest part, just that negotiating this differently with somebody else. Yeah.
And what has that kind of shifted or changed or strengthened or anything to your relationship?
Oh my God, totally. I feel like we're so much like stronger and more confident about what we do now. Like, it's like, oh, we just did this. Like, oh my God, holy crap. And like, not only, like less than 2 years ago, we didn't have a business. Like we didn't have a business, like, or staff or any of this together ever. And now we've ended up like creating the business because the Feng Shui business has grown so much, which I was doing. Ken has basically come in and been working nearly full time. So we're like working together. And it's just been amazing, like to be able to go, wow, we've just created this from nothing, like from absolute scratch together. So that's really, really great. Like that whole thing has kind of like, oh, wow, look back. And even if we just compare where we are this time last year to now, it's like, it is like night and day, just like the abundance, the way we kind of set things up and how we're able to talk about like it's like, well, what do we want and what needs to be here to create that next step? And that whole thing of like, it does go back to that question again. What do we want? Is this what we want? How can we change it? So rather than it being kind of like that person on your own, we talk about it a lot, and it's adaptable. That's the really nice thing, is we've both really learned to be able to how to adapt and to grow with each other with this journey. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Cool.
So one final question. I always like to wrap the show by visioning a little bit and also give you the opportunity for me and the listeners to kind of witness and hold space for what you're creating. So can you share with us what's next for you, whether it's just a micro leap or if it's some big leap that's coming up? What's next?
So there's like a micro leap and kind of a macro leap. The micro leap is is really bringing my program up. It's like an upgrade. Like everything seems like it's on a bigger up. So that's a leap up basically in my branding, in the way I present things, my videos, all of that stuff has just happened. So that's kind of like, it's in process. So that's going out in January, and it's kind of like, okay, ready, kind of a change, a shift, to growth. And then in the middle of next year, we're working on a book. And that's kind of like, as you know, it's like, okay, it's the next thing. And that's happening. And I feel like there's been a lot of nudges from that, not only just like hanging around with you, but like a lot of other people. It's like, okay, I need to get my act together. So that's really the next thing. And it's scary putting your message out there, as you know, like just like getting it all down, getting it out there. And that feels like it's scary, but it feels right. And I think that's where in the past, I really did not really ever see so far into the future with visions and stuff. I kind of was like, oh, more a bit like scattered. And now it's like a clear, I feel like I'm really like on purpose, which is, Bali has definitely helped us with that.
Awesome. Yeah, it is a rather magical place. That is where, for our listeners that don't know, that is where Patricia and I met.
Hey.
Very serendipitously, multiple times.
I know. So good.
Cool. Well, thank you. I can't wait to read your book and
Thank you.
hear all about it. And for those of you that don't know as well, Patricia has Feng Shui'd my home. So she came in and helped me make sure that all the energy was great in my home. It's a very, very important, like we talked about in her intro, that outer world kind of energetically matching what you're creating in your inner world as well.
So it's super important. Thank you so much, Bree.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening. I'm delighted to hear from you all. If you have any questions about leaping or Bali or anything like that, or Feng Shui, just hit me up.
Yes, you can find Patricia on her website at patricialohan.com. It'll all be in the show notes so that y'all can find her. She is phenomenal. And thank you to the listeners for joining me for another great episode of Permission to Leap. If you're looking to take your next big leap, you can always check out my book that guides you through the process on Amazon. It's called Permission to Leap, just in case you didn't know, but hopefully you know since you're listening to the podcast. Remember, every day, there needs to be more people like you living an inspired life and making a difference in the world. As I say on this episode and all the episodes, the world needs you. Much love today and always. I will catch you all on the next episode of Permission to Leap.